get death threats, have to travel with private security, that whole deal. Okay.
I was just going to ask you, do you have to travel with security?
Yeah, I got plenty of death threats, sure. Yeah,
Wow.
but I'm not complaining. And if they have a problem, they can eat my dog and it will not go well for them. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
And that's not a threat.
Yeah.
My dog's pretty intense. So,
In recent years, you may have noticed that biblical truth or even conservative ideas are being protested, canceled, or outright banned by today's mainstream media. 2010 or even 5 years ago, I never would have imagined the day when freedom of speech would be controversial, while communism would be openly praised on our college campuses. Welcome to 2022. And yet, in the midst of this hostile climate, there are still voices who courageously speak the truth. And here's the good news. That audience is growing. Today, I'm joined by Charlie Kirk, the founder and president of Turning Point USA, a national student movement dedicated to identifying, organizing, and empowering young people. Charlie, thanks for coming.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.
So Charlie, who are you? Where did you come from? How does all this stuff happen?
I'm a child of God, and Jesus is my Savior, and grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I went to Christian Heritage Academy, where I gave my life to the Lord in 5th grade, went from there to public school, graduated high school, and I had no money, no connections, and no idea what I was doing. And I started Turning Point USA, and I did that instead of going to college.
So Turning Point USA, maybe some of our audience isn't familiar with it. Talk a little bit about Turning Point, why it exists, and what you hope to accomplish.
Yeah, we're the nation's largest organization that is focused on a daily basis to make sure your kids and grandkids live in a free country. We're losing the West, and we're losing it for a variety of different reasons. In Turning Point USA, we operate with a sense of urgency to turn the country back to the ideas of liberty, which is God's idea, not man's idea, freedom, which is granted from God, not government, the Constitution, which is a divinely inspired document, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others. And this is something that I think that every Christian and any person with a moral conscience should care about. And so, but at Turning Point USA, we do this in a variety of different ways, through high school and college chapter development, through our work with the biggest events in the entire movement. We are dominant on digital and social media. We do this through our campus leadership project. We do this through our pastor network. There's a variety of different ways that we do this at Turning Point USA. But look, we want to make sure that American values are passed down to the next generation. And we make very clear moral claims that liberty and freedom is not just the best way to live, but it's necessary for a flourishing human existence.
Charlie, what do you consider to be the defining issues of our day?
Oh, there's several. To kind of bring it to a metaphysical realm, what is truth and what is true? And that kind of explains the whole transgender debate. It explains kind of the idea of racial politics in America. So definitely objective versus subjective existence is one of the biggest issues, no doubt. But if I kind of had to distill it down to the issue that impacts that, which impacts all the other issues, which is what we focus on at Turning Point USA, it's education. How we educate young people is one of the most, if not the most important issue for a civilization to continue. That impacts our spiritual health, our mental health, our physical health, our civilizational health. And we've done a pretty poor job of it. We've done the opposite. We've indoctrinated young children. We have filled them up with bad ideas. We've told them to hate themselves and hate the country and believe there's no God. And then there's other issues as well. Declining sovereignty, internationalist forces trying to crush America, a guilt-ridden nation that has strayed from the Lord, a weak church, an increasingly weak and passive church, with obvious exceptions, right? Obvious, which we've talked about, and that's not an exhaustive list. So yeah, I mean, these are some massive issues. A spiritual battle that it seems as if so many people don't even want to admit exists. So I could focus on any of those, but that's definitely a starting point.
So it seems like when most people identify with you, rather than immediately say, well, he's a religious person, they refer to you more as a political person. And yet faith is central to who you are, what you do, and I'm not gonna say your politics are formed from that, but your life approach is basically biblically based.
Yeah.
So how does someone who is so biblically based find themselves in the midst of so many controversial political things? How has that emerged, or how has your voice found its way into those places?
Yeah, I've been a Christian since 5th grade, and I've always just kind of been a political animal. I've just kind of enjoyed trying to call out lies and deceit and, untruth and mistruths, I guess you could say. And I don't like bullies, and I don't like the strong terrorizing the weak. I've never liked that. And that's a moral claim, by the way, that comes from the Bible. So politics kind of puts all that together. I will be honest, though, in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, I felt a lot more passive about talking about my faith because I was kind of told not to, both by pastors and politicians.
Wow.
If you think about it, pastors are like, don't you dare bring that in here. Don't bring it in the church. I grew up in a church environment that you do not talk about politics. You do not talk about philosophy. You just talk about the Bible. We just do the gospel. That's it. Which, of course, is, I believe, unbiblical, right? Wow. Nehemiah, Jeremiah, Esther, Mordecai, Daniel, amongst many others, were all political figures.
Yes.
Fasted and prayed for the nation.
Even Deborah.
Yeah, exactly. The counselors to the king.
Yes.
So there's many examples of that. But then also politicians like, oh, no, keep that Christian stuff away. We just care about tax cuts and all this other nonsense. And it was 17, 18, 19, you get older, things start to clarify more. And I met Rob McCoy, who's my pastor, and does such a great job. And he really kind of changed my perspective on that. But look, I don't blame people for saying that I'm a political guy. That is my day job, right? And so I'm focused on the second most important thing that I think a human being can focus on. So then, of course, everyone says, well, what's the first thing? Okay, well, the first thing is winning souls for Jesus Christ. Most important thing. Well, then, Charlie, what's the second thing? To make sure you can do the first thing.
That's good.
It's my day job.
That's good. What advice would you give to our viewers who are afraid to take on controversial issues?
I get it. It is hard. So you just have to admit one truth, and then you can chart your course from there, which is you will not be able to get your country back and keep everything you have. It's impossible. You will lose friends, you'll lose contracts, you'll lose relationships, but you will gain in wisdom and in courage, and you'll actually end up gaining in friendships that matter. So no, the fear is totally correct if those things matter to you.
Charlie, I was fascinated in one of the segments with the college students. One young man from a Christian university said that he could not start a Turning Point USA club on campus.
That's
he could
correct.
not get permission. Help me understand that. What's the issue there?
A lot of Christian institutions have been taken over by the woke left, and it's a major issue that needs to be addressed. And we're talking about Point Loma, which is a school, I think, in San Diego, if I'm not mistaken, not too far from here. And yeah, they've been totally co-opted. But look, there is a belief in some institutional Christianity that the conservative natural law view of the world is wrong. And I think that they need to read their Bibles. And because it's very simple. I don't mean to overcomplicate this. Bad politics means bad theology. It's that simple. It's either you believe in the irrefutable and the inerrant, I should say, Word of God, or you think it's something else. If you think it's something else, you're probably going to have bad politics.
Wow. So how do we raise up our children and grandchildren in this culture? How do we take our schools back, Charlie? I mean, tell me, what's the plan?
Well, so I'm a big fan of homeschooling for a variety of different reasons. We want to be partners at TPUSA to help you homeschool if we can at all. There's some phenomenal homeschooling groups out there. There's Classical Conversations, there's Hillsdale, and I'm just beginning to learn the space. But the homeschooling population has nearly doubled in the last year and a half.
Wow.
And it's so terrific. Now, for some families, they say, I can't do that, and maybe they send them to private school. Okay, well, keep your eyes on them, or public school. Well, really keep your eyes on them. I actually think parents will learn that homeschooling is a lot more achievable than they might think, but there's an economic reason why public schools have grown so much over the last 20 years. They're getting smaller finally. And the economic reason, this is where conservatives need to be willing to talk about this, is that in 1985, you were able to support a family of 4 on 36 weeks of labor a year. So meaning you only had to work 36 weeks and the other 16 weeks of labor could be used for leisure, savings, investment, or whatever. Now to support a family of 4, it takes 54 weeks of labor a year.
So we're going backwards.
Which means you have to have the spouse go into the labor force.
Wow.
So what does that do? Makes it harder to homeschool. You got to go into debt. The mom's not there to raise the kids, send them to daycare. It destroys the American family. And this is something where I think Christians need to be unafraid to contest in, which is we need an economic policy that is market-based, but also makes it easier for mothers to stay at home. I think it's insane that moms have to go back to work after 6 weeks. We as Christians should be the ones supporting that. That, if anything, that's the bond that we should want to stay permanent and real and true and beautiful. So how do we win this back? Homeschooling, taking back our school boards, all these things. I mean, education is what I focus on every single day. Education comes from a Latin word, which means to lead forth the light, to lead forth the wisdom. And the question is, are we properly or effectively leading forth this generation? I think the results are probably questionable right now.
So, big controversy, Loudoun County, Virginia. And all of a sudden, You've got a new governor there. Talk to me about what's happening in the schools in direct relation to that.
I'll talk in generalities because I don't know when people will be, watching some of this stuff. But in general, you're starting to see the parents start to rise up and push back against some of this tyrannical measures, push back against CRT, and then you're seeing the schools not obey the orders of a governor or the orders of the parents. And you're in very explicit words. I can show you a school board member op-ed or the Michigan Democrat Party or other ones that say very explicitly, parents have no say in education. They're saying that part out loud now.
Wow.
Now this is really important because the only commandment in the 10 Commandments that comes with a promise and involves the nation is honor your mother and father so you might live long in the land of which you are in. So that involves your country, and it has a promise, and it involves your children. So if you're able to break the bond effectively between a parent and a child, you destroy not just the child, you destroy not just the promise, you destroy the country too.
Wow.
And Stalin knew this. So for example, almost every person will joke around like the phrase Mother Russia. You've probably heard that phrase before. Well, that phrase was a substitutionary phrase for children that were told that the real mother is not your biological mother. It's the state. If you've ever heard of Mao Zedong's Red Guard, it was comprised of young teenagers that would go in and turn their parents in for being insufficiently loyal to Mao Zedong's regime. So the satanic, diabolical, and demonic idea of breaking the bond between a parent and a child is nothing new. In fact, it's necessary for that sort of form of government to come in.
TBN audience watching this right now, they're probably scratching their head, feeling a little bit, oh my gosh, maybe a little bit of panic even. It's like, what can we do? So I know we can pray. I know we can go to church. But it seems to me that even as the students were talking today, that the odds are stacked against them at the university level. And some of them had supportive mom and dads. They talked about that. So the average TBN viewer who's at home watching this right now, what do we say to them that encourages them, strengthens them? What action steps can they take?
Well, thankfully, we have momentum. We do. The citizen is rising and the regime is falling. Let me talk about what the regime is really quick. The regime is a cartel of interests that you feel the pressure from every single day. Political, corporate, cultural, musical, athletic. It's all these different interests that seem to be saying the same thing. That is the quote-unquote regime. Okay, so I use that phrase. It's collapsing. The ratings at top cable networks are plummeting. Social media companies are losing value and losing users at a record pace. People are pulling their kids out of public school at a record rate. You're starting to see new entrepreneurial companies gain in value that are competing against these social media companies. You're seeing an increase in homeschooling. The trajectory right now is extremely positive. And so my answer to your question is there's three types of people, two of which are moral and necessary, one of which are immoral and can be cast aside. There's the people that are the opposition, okay? There's a lot of those people. We can focus on that if you want. But there's two types of moral and courageous people. There's the fighters and the people that help the fighters. Be one of those people. So not everyone's going to do what I do, travel 330 days a year, travel to college campuses, go to Berkeley, go to Stanford, go to UCLA, go to NYU. I've been to all those places, go to Brown, speak, get death threats, have to travel with private security, that whole deal. Okay.
I was just going to ask you, do you have to travel with security?
Oh, yeah. I got plenty of death threats, sure. Yeah,
Wow.
but I'm not complaining. And if they have a problem, they can eat my dog and it will not go well for them. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
And that's not a threat.
Yeah.
My dog's pretty intense. So, but yeah, then there's the people that help the fighters.
Okay.
Supply the metaphorical munitions lines.
Yeah.
So people say, what do I do? And I lovingly say this. Okay, what are your school board members? What are their names? And what are the issues you're praying for by name? So I don't know. So, well, 1 Timothy, know your leaders, pray for them by name and the issues they're dealing with. It's one of the last things Paul wrote to young Timothy. One of the last things.
Wow. Got
to know about that, right? And here's the thing that people don't want to hear. But actually, once they hear it, it's kind of refreshing. It's kind of like the doctor that's like, hey, you got a tumor. We can remove it, but you got to act. First 10 minutes, awful. Then like, okay, let's do it. Which is this. It's going to cost you something, as I said previously, and you have to dramatically act now. Well, what does that mean? Run for office, help people that are running for office, find the groups that are involved. If you're a grandparent, why aren't you homeschooling your child or your grandchild? Why not? No, seriously. I'm going to be a little bit like, push it. If you're not homeschooling your kid, well, my son or daughter won't let me. Okay, that's a good answer. Or is it maybe really I'm challenging? Are you using your golden years to the greatest glory of God?
Wow.
Are you showing up to local Republican precinct committee meetings? And I'm not trying to make this political, okay? But let's just use that as an example, or local political, right? Whatever party you might fall on, whatever.
Okay.
Figure that out. So, whatever. So, but yeah, look, I mean, you get the point, which is focus on things that matter and you have to act.
Because we have a role to play. We can't just abdicate and just say, well, the whole world's gone to hell. There's nothing we can do to fix it. We're still here. While we still have breath, God's asking us to be responsive and to be responsible. So, Charlie, what can we do to stay informed and not get overwhelmed?
Yeah, so that's the other thing where people say, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Learn every day. Dedicate time to learn. I take Hillsdale online courses. They're phenomenal. People want to. We partnered with them. This is not a pitch. There's no money involved. It's all free of charge. It's charlieforhillsdale.com, literally free of charge. There's no money. Online courses, they could check it out. They could sign up. I love learning. And learning is so important because it will make you less anxious about what's happening around you. And so, for example, if you know the characteristics of a constitutional republic and where they're trying to head us, you have such clarity on what their plan is, and then you'll be informed and empowered on how to stop it. You'll know what the Constitution says and does. Separation of powers, consent of governed, independent judiciary. All these are unique characteristics of a constitutional republic. And I know a lot of people watching this are just there. I feel like I'm losing my country. I feel like I'm losing this. And there's there's three ways. There's three ways people react to it, right? They react to it by being despondent and they just check out. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Wrong answer.
Yeah.
Daniel fasted and prayed for his nation. Jeremiah 29:7, which is demand the welfare of the nation of which you are in, because your welfare is tied to the nation's welfare. That's the Lord speaking.
Wow. It's good.
The next category is people get radical. They start believing weird stuff. Stop that. Like, if it comes from some sort of weird website that has like 50 numbers in it, it's just stop going down the rabbit hole and all that. I mean that. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
So then, like, there must be a deeper plan at play. Probably isn't, actually. I know all the actors, probably not, okay? Or the third thing you do is just act, make hope happen. Do everything you can and leave the rest up to the Lord.
Wow. What would you suggest is a Christian's role in government?
Counselor to the king, which is exactly what Daniel was, which is, and at times we should try to run for office. We should try to be involved in government. In a constitutional republic, though, the role, as we have it in America, is to be the counselor to the king.
Wow.
Which is to be the director, which is to be the corrector, which is to be the clarifier of wisdom, of truth. And at its best, America had that. And I just want to give a shout out of what I think of one of the most effective fighters for liberty and freedom, who doesn't get credit for this. He gets credit for a lot, which is Billy Graham. Billy Graham in the 1950s went on a crusade that a lot of people forgot about, where he said communism was Satan's religion. Look it up.
Wow.
Said it repeatedly, hundreds of times across the country, where he said, we are in a demonic battle where the thought of materialism, secularism, and communism is coming to America, and we cannot allow it to happen. And a lot of people don't remember that version of Billy Graham, right? They remember the version of Billy Graham of open-air revivals, and that's awesome, by the way. That's what he should be remembered for. But I think this chapter in the Billy Graham legacy is important, where he was the counselor to the king. He was the only guy that was able to meet with presidents of both parties, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He met with everyone, up and down. But he was unafraid to proclaim biblical truth. And whenever the nation started to slip, Billy Graham spoke up. And if you kind of look at American Christianity, almost everyone can trace back an influence to Billy Graham in some sense. He is the closest thing to the agreed upon person that almost no one has nothing bad to say about, right?
Okay.
But even he was willing to get in the trenches to fight against this sort of existential materialistic evil.
Wow. As I did the intro today, we talked about, I never thought in America that you would hear communism spoken about as a considered ideology. And yet, here it is again. Where's our Billy Graham, again, speaking out against it in that level of capacity? Because it seems to be something that's growing again. Why is that ideology growing?
Well, it's human nature. Humans want to be taken care of. When God delivered his chosen people out of Egypt, they didn't live in a position of gratitude and liberty. After a little bit, they were like, wait a second, who's this Moses guy? And why are we here? And you know what they said? They said, take us back to Egypt, because at least we had meat. God blew quail off course and he sent manna from heaven. They had no need unprovided for, but they wanted meat. They preferred comfortable slavery to dangerous freedom. Liberty is hard. It's very hard. It's very fragile. I think there's a part of humanity that wants to be free. I think there's a larger part that wants to be taken care of. I think that tension is playing out all the time. And so, look, communism plays to the utopian, demonic, satanic narrative of you do not have to work, you do not have to want, I will take care of you, and pleasure will be your God. That's why it's popular.
Wow.
So when we talk about believers and standing up for our rights, what does the Bible say about getting involved? I know you touched on it, but what should we do? I mean, it's more specifically, what should we biblically do as believers?
Yeah, and some people believe that the church or Christians should not comment ever about local politics or about being a citizen. They say, all we do is the gospel and we don't get engaged in those sorts of things. Well, then there's a lot of verses that they're going to have to explain with that sort of a position. Jeremiah 29:7, demand the welfare of the nation or the city of which you are in, because your welfare is tied to your nation's welfare. That's the Lord speaking in Jeremiah 29:7. Now, in every church you'll go to, you'll probably hear Jeremiah 29:11, which is one of the most quoted scriptures, for I know the plans I have laid in front of you. But rarely do you hear about Jeremiah 29:7, which is a commandment to care about what's happening in the local nation or city. Not to mention Daniel, Esther, Mordecai, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, and let's just focus on Daniel in particular. Daniel fasted and prayed for the well-being of the nation that he was in. And so Daniel was faced with a choice that the American church was faced with, that Steve Smotherman was faced with, that Legacy Church was faced with. It was the Daniel trial. And I'll tell you, before we go any further, 98% of American churches failed the Daniel trial. And the Daniel trial was very clear. In Daniel 6, there was a conspiracy, a legitimate conspiracy, kind of launched against Daniel, where I forget the names of certain individuals that then lobbied King Nebuchadnezzar, basically saying, we don't like this Daniel guy, he has too much influence, kind of like the American church, isn't it? And we don't like what they're doing, so we're going to pass a series of measures that are in defiance to Old Testament commandments from the Torah. And Daniel's going to have to choose whether or not to obey God or to obey this government edict. And one of the orders was that you are not able to pray in a certain capacity, especially in public and facing the city. So Daniel hears about this, and the scriptures tell us that Daniel was grieved by it, but then Daniel made a conscious decision. Daniel opened up the window for all to see, and he intentionally disobeyed the government and the king's orders, and he prayed to the city for all the people to see. So that was an act of what would be first called Old Testament civil disobedience. That's the equivalent of you being here at church tonight. Now, all of you know the story of Daniel in the lion's den. That's how he got in the lion's den. We don't always talk about that. Like, oh yeah, he's in the lion's den and God delivered him from that. And of course, that's the other part of the story, is that God will never forsake his children when you obey his commands. Yeah. And that's a very important thing.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.